Good morning, everyone. PatBenage here, the evolution coach, creator of the 6-Week Shift and the Inner Path, and author of this inspirational blog, SoulTalk. And this morning, it's interesting because I kind of thought I had a pretty good idea of what I was going to talk about actually on Wednesday. And I actually thought this is my topic. It's going to be my topic and ready to go. And then boom, this morning, in my contemplation, that it evolved, which is how everything works, you know. And in fact, it was perfect because the original topic was about not limiting yourself by focusing on a particular goal, instead focus toward an end result. Keep your focus toward what your ultimate goal is, and have that be fluid so that it has the ability to evolve as you move forward, and you can see beyond that tunnel vision that you can get from focusing on something specific. And so I get a little lesson about that all at the same time of actually going through this process. And so I thought I was going to teach about that this morning and talk about that this morning. But what I'm going to talk about today, actually, is truth. And specifically, the question that came to me this morning was, what is absolute truth? What is absolute truth? And if it exists, how do you know? How do you find out? How do you come to know what the real truth is about anything? And what came to me at the time this morning was that absolute truth, there is only one absolute truth. Because by definition, absolute means all-encompassing. It encompasses everything. And so the only absolute truth is the truth of everything, of all that is. And what came through is that the only way that I can know truth is to experience it. So until I've experienced all of it, I can't know absolute truth. And yet, we are all, you know, at some level, I believe, I suspect anyway, that we're all in this journey toward truth, toward that absolute truth. And so we are experiencing bits and pieces of it along the way. And that's what this journey of life is really all about, is experiencing truth in all its forms. And so there are a lot of people out here that believe things are true. And there's a lot of people that, you know, when you believe something is true, then something that is contrary to that becomes untrue. And so, and there's all these people that are out talking about their truth as if it is true. And so who do you believe in that? You know, we have leaders in various areas, whether that be in, you know, communities or nations or religions or whatever it might be, in businesses that espouse a particular viewpoint, a particular belief. And sometimes those different beliefs are contradictory. And so who do you believe? Who is really speaking the truth? And if one is speaking the truth, then does that mean the other one is lying? They're speaking an untruth. Or are either of them speaking truth, or any of them speaking truth? And what came to me is that there is, even in the biggest lie, there is an element of truth. And so in all things, there are elements of truth. And from a certain perspective, it can seem to be the whole truth. But the whole truth encompasses all of it, and all of it is part of the whole truth. And so that's where I get to, there's an element of truth within everything, and everything is an element of the absolute truth. There's a piece of that. But if you just look at a piece of it, then your view of truth becomes very skewed. You start to believe that this piece is true, and so all of this other part of the truth is false. And these are relative truths. So the relative truth is the piece of truth. It's a particular perspective on it. And I've talked about before the idea of how you get to know something, and you know it. And it was in a talk about 5D, fifth dimensional viewing, fifth dimensional perspective. So you have the first dimension, the one dimension, which is just surface, face value kind of thing. 2 dimensions gives a little bit more depth to that. You can see a little bit broader picture of it. And 3D, you're sort of viewing around it, so you see all sides, a 360 degree, and actually a 360 by 360, so kind of a overall picture of it. And then 4D is that watching that over time, so see how it changes, and change is part of its truth. And then the 5th dimension, which is seeing it from the inside. So that's the experiencing of that. And so there's the 5 dimensions, but there's within, that's the absolute. But within the relative truth, there's also a 6th dimension. And the 6th dimension is, how does that affect anything else? So within, you can experience and you can know something within those 5 dimensions, but there's a 6th dimension, and that's the karmic dimension. That's cause and effect. That's, how did this come to be, and how does it affect everything else? And so that's even a more difficult thing to get. So within these pieces of truth, these relative truths, there is an absolute truth about those aspects. But that absolute truth is not only that 5 dimensions, but the 6th dimension of how does it affect everything else, and what created it? How did it come into being? Because that's the real true picture of it. That's the absolute truth. But here's the thing: you can't know that. Not within this perspective, not from this perspective, because it involves all of these other individuals, all of the other pieces that are affected by that one aspect. Does that make sense? So whenever I look at something and I decide I know what's true about it, I can only actually know a small portion of what is true about it. I might be able to, if I really took the time to study and to get inside and feel and go through that whole 5D process, I might be able to capture that about some things. But even then, I can't know the whole truth about it because I can't get that sixth dimension. I can't get that piece of the puzzle because I'm not able to go and experience everybody else's experience surrounding that. And I, I might be able to come up with how did this piece get created. I might be able to come up with what the cause was that began that process. But even that's so difficult because then you got to get into what's true about that cause. How did that get created? And so it's a never ending, infinite thing that we call truth. So absolute truth, when you say absolute, it means it almost gives you this idea about something finite, something that you can say, okay, this is it. But absolute truth is infinite. And so there is no ability to know that. We can only pursue it, and we can only attempt to experience it one piece at a time, one moment at a time. And that's the critical aspect. And in truth, the only thing that we can know with any real certainty, with any degree of absolute truth, is ourselves. And this is why I focus so much on going inside, connecting with who you are inside, who you really are. And the only, well, I won't say the only, but the highest pursuit that anyone can attempt is to know oneself. And a lot of the great masters of all time, they've said the same thing, know thyself. And that's the key. Because, as I've said before, we are a microcosm of the macrocosm. We have, the other thing is that, as Christ said, as other masters have said in different ways, the kingdom of heaven lies within. It's not out here somewhere. It's all of this, but all of this is represented perfectly within. The other analogy is the ocean and the drop. So if you think of all that is as this ocean, I am the drop from that ocean. And the drop is just a smaller version of it. It contains all that is contained within the ocean, within that one, each drop. And so you and I, we're drops from the ocean, but we're a microcosm for the whole, the absolute, the all of it. And so in order to know truth, we explore within. We explore who we are. I look at who I am, and I am truth in a more compact version. And my whole lifespan, not this PatBenage lifespan, my whole lifespan as a soul is spent experiencing who I am, my truth, in all its forms, in all of its forms. It is the highest pursuit, to pursue truth. And in that process of pursuing truth, that's how we achieve self-realization. Because it's only through knowing oneself that you can then experience being your whole self, which is self-realization. And then beyond that, to realize not only that I am soul, but that soul is of the same essence, that soul is the ocean, and then that soul is the God of its own universe. So I am the God of this microcosmic universe that is me, that is my truth. And that's God realization. When you fully embody that, when you fully know that, when you're being that, that's the height of it. But that is the process. The process is to pursue truth. And when you have spent enough time looking out here to try to find truth out here, as I've tried to explain here, that's a lost cause. You can't get it all. You can't experience all of it out here. Eventually, you have to realize that it's infinite. It's infinite. That you cannot possibly know all of that, because that sixth dimension makes it impossible. Because I can't know what everybody else's experience is. Just can't. I can try over, millions of lifetimes to have all of those experiences, but it's not the same. I still can't get to the ultimate truth. I still can't get to absolute truth. And so the only place where I can come close to that is going within. And even then, it's still an infinite process, but it's a manageable one. It's one that I can pursue and not get lost in. Does that make sense? I can get lost out here pursuing truth that's outside of my own self. I can't get lost in here. There are certain things I can get lost in other dimensions. I'll talk about that at a different time, but I can't get lost when I'm pursuing truth within. And so that's how we get to it. That's how we come to know truth. And as kind of a final thing today, what I want to say is that there is truth in all things. And all things have an element of truth. And they're part of the whole truth. So if you have an idea that what you know is true, and that makes something else untrue, then you probably need to rethink that. Because truth is bigger than that. And whenever I say that something's absolutely true, I can only really say that my experience of it is true, that this part is true. I can't know beyond that. And so I can't ever talk about what's true for you. You know, even in the most clear situations, I can't, the only thing that I can say that's absolutely true is that absolute truth is infinite. Beyond that, I don't know. And so keep that in mind. I think all of the great masters of all time, Jesus, Buddha, any of them, Muhammad, Lao Tzu, Hafiz, Rumi, any of the great masters of all time, Swamiji, they all would say, don't believe me. Don't believe me. Experience for yourself. And that should be the test to see if someone is speaking their truth. If they're trying to tell you what your truth is, don't believe them. If they're just speaking their truth, they'll tell you not to believe them. To simply seek the truth within you. To find your own truth. To take whatever it is that I say, take whatever it is that I have to offer, and if it feels appropriate, try it on. See if it works for you. But don't believe me. Don't believe that I have the answer. That I'm speaking absolute truth, because nobody speaks absolute truth. Can't be done. So, I hope this has been helpful for you. I hope it's given you some insight, maybe sparked something within you to seek that truth within. And we'll see you next week. Remember, live life from the inside out.